So this will probably be the final part of our three-part series on running effective startup discovery from the perspective of the founder. Although we can probably create an entire podcast on just running effective discovery. But I know that we have a lot more to talk about in the coming weeks, including fundraising, capital as a founder, go to market strategies, designing, developing, testing, launching, operating, scaling, building strong teams, tech trends that are recent. So there's a lot to cover. So we don't want to spend all our time on discovery, and we have a lot to get to. So I'm thinking dedicating 3 episodes to discovery is a solid start. What do you think, Shukri?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. And we can always talk more. We can also we'll throw in some book recommendations because there's a really good book on the kind of discovery subject called the Mom Test. And I recommend many first time founders just read that book. It'll change your life.
I was using one market analysis tool called Awesome, OSUM, recent startup um, by a guy you might know, Shukri. I'll send it to you afterwards. But um, the tool is essentially able to perform pretty in-depth analysis of what a company does, who their target audience is, who their competitors are, um, how you should sell to them, how you should sell to the ICP. It's pretty in depth, and it does it all in about like 20 seconds worth of research once you put in the website. All you need is the website or like the product link. It even analyzes like Amazon products. And I think about a few months back, I sent you a market analysis from Awesome based on BitLab's website. And one of the things that it had was the mom test. And before that, I've never heard about the mom test, but the items that it included in it made 100% sense.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll point our audience to a couple more really helpful tools. Um, there is one called Go Zigzag that a good friend of mine, he's a previously COO of Techstars, and him
Mhm.
and his team actually co-founded that tool, Go Zigzag. It it's helpful. It's actually helpful before you do the discovery. So you go in and you kind of punch in what your startup is about, and they generate like uh, many relevant. So you punch in kind of what your startup is about, and they generate what's called like the lean canvas, your business model canvas. What critical hypotheses you want to evaluate for your startup, and it's pretty awesome. So I recommend people who are following us to check that out. And the other tool that I'll bring up, because so if you've done discovery properly, you have maybe 100 recordings with 100 hour. You have if you've done discovery properly, you have hundreds of hours worth of customer interview recordings, and at the point where you have a volume, it becomes very hard for you to kind of go back and reference each interview and what the pain points were. So there's tools like Condense that are like really designed with the discovery in mind. Condense, and we can link to it. It's called condense.io. Oh no, sorry, is it this one? Oh yeah, that's the one. Condense.io, which is a it's a little bit pricey, but it's a great tool if you're really taking this seriously. You're doing your customer discoveries at scale. This will automatically like highlight pain points, and so AI powered tool.
Yeah, I haven't heard of either of those. And the nice thing is that they're specific to startups, it seems like.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But for my first question, in the previous 2 episodes, we talked about the importance of having 100 conversations as a metric. And digging a little bit deeper into that, can you break down the ideal structure of those discovery conversations?
So if you look at our discovery template, what we're trying to find out is who the person is, where are they located. Then we're getting them to describe their role at the company that they're part of, how long they've been in that role, how do they describe their customers, how big their team is, and all of these questions. Like the first ones are really getting to know the prospect and how does he look at things around him, how does he look at his role in the organization that he plays in, who does he help. And then we're also looking at key metrics, like what metrics is that executive that I'm selling to, and the context here is B2B SaaS, but you can generalize this into B2C, and all you're trying to do is kind of understand the day in the life of your customer and what are the things that they genuinely care about. You're also trying to find out their personal goals. Many times you think that all I need to do is just like sell the guy the tool, but I'm like, wait, there's a person behind this sale, and you want to know their hopes, fears, and dreams on a personal level. Then you also want to know their career goals at professional level, and then ideally you're trying to align what you have with how it translates to. You want to describe how what you have to offer will translate into progress for them, whether it's on their personal goal level or on their professional level. So these are important questions to tease out those insights. And then
And it starts at the surface level, at a super high level, to understand their day-to-day life, to see how one part, you know, of their day impacts the overall picture of them being in their company.
when I'm selling a customer, I want to know what are the pain points, what are the big fires that they're fighting right now, and ideally align what I have to offer, my offering, or my startup, or my tech, or my solution with those fires. Why? Because it's all about the sense of urgency. We, it's easier for me to justify spending money on big problems, right? Like I think one way to look at this is every company has a limited amount of money to spend. Nobody has infinite money. And if you think about it in that way, if I have 100 problems in my company, at any point in time, I can only invest, a chunk of the revenue or chunk of the money I raised towards certain problems. So the higher or the bigger the problem, the more money gets allocated to that problem. And so our goal here is to kind of tease out the big pain points. And what we're looking for is alignment between those pain points and what I have to offer. And if there is no alignment, you want to know that. Because if I talk to 100 customers and what I have to sell is not in the top 3 pain points, this means either one of two things. Either it means I have to go find other customers who have what I have to offer as like one of their top pain points, or this means I'm going after a problem that is a nice to have, not a hair on fire kind of problem. And we want to build our startup, we want to build our tech, and we want to build our product around solving hair on fire kind of problems. Then if we look, the other thing that we want to tease out is why. This is where we get into problem agitation. So okay, you have these top 2 or 3 things screaming at you. Why are they a problem in the first place? And what do they think the root cause analysis of that failure? So what do you think is kind of the root behind that failure? And this now goes deeper into the problem, right? We're trying to understand, okay, so what is that problem that I'm facing right now? And then where does it stem, or what does it stem from? Because what this allows me to do is to Let's imagine that the root cause of the problem is the organization itself, how it's structured, how it's built, or the root cause of the problem is an employee on 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 this customer's team. These are problems that no amount of software are going to fix. And in that case, you're also teasing out the processes and what's broken in that customer's world. And now you have a much better understanding of the problem. And once you've done this 100 times, you'll start to see clear patterns emerge in that data. And I'm trying to find a story to tell you here without revealing too much about how we've done like practical kind of life discoveries.
But those are the best stories, Shukri.
I know, but sometimes it's the we have kind of confidentiality in place. Or if I reveal too much there, I'm revealing what that startup does, and so now that's kind of where confidentiality becomes a problem. But let me find a story. Um, Man, okay, let me think of a good story here on this subject.
Absolutely. While I think of a story, what you've just described really reminds me of a particular sales process called SPIN. Situation, problem, implication, need, payoff. And if we look at how you've structured your discovery interview template, it's exactly that, right? We ask a lot of high level surface questions on how many team members do they have? What's their day to day? From there, we go into, okay, what are your priorities right now? What are the burning problems? And then we go into, once we've identified all the problems, we reiterate it to them and say, okay, I got this problem number one, problem number two, problem number three. Anything else? Okay, cool. We got these three, four problems. Out of them, which one is the most burning one? And then you go into the implication of what happens if we don't solve it. Or we go deeper down the pain funnel. Tell me more about this issue. Can you be more specific? Can you give me an example? How long has that been a problem? What have you tried to do about it? Did it work? How much do you think that cost you? How do you feel about that? Have you given up trying to deal with this problem? So that's all kind of implication questions. And from there, we go into the need payoff. Now, if we were to, or if someone was to install a solution for you that solved it, what would be the payoff from that? So you reframe their mind from a negative into a positive. Like, here's what I can get. Here's the payoff from the problem that you have that we can solve.
And that's about getting them to imagine the world. I think you're able to close someone on a sale if you can get them to imagine. They know the before. You want them to experience the pain of the before, and then you want them to imagine the after. And the more vivid that picture of the after, which is the transformation, right? So if you think about any software that I'm selling or any product or any service that I'm selling, what you're selling is a transformation from the before state to the after state. And the before state could be, oh yeah, I have this problem right now. It's my top problem. It's screaming at me. It's painful and it's horrible and it's making us lose money. Or we're leaving a lot of money on the table. And then you want them to imagine the world after this problem is solved, where now we're raking the dough. Now the problem is solved. How beautiful this world is. And now I'll share with you a good story on this. So we were working in the logistics space, and so think the easy way to describe the problem is there are companies that ship their products into Costco's, into Walmart's, into the very big chain stores, and we were working in the logistics industry with one large shipper who happens to be shipping to these kind of big brands. And when we were in the startup, our hunch was that those shippers, they want visibility. And we thought they wanted this visibility because they wanted to ensure the stuff is arriving on time. We initially thought there's KPIs that they're being measured against when it comes to that. And that turned out true. However, as we started talking to shippers who met that persona we described, from the third interview, we realized that wasn't the big pain point. The visibility is not the pain point. It turns out that every time a truck arrives late to, to a Costco, to a Walmart, to a Coca-Cola, sorry, to a Costco or a Walmart, I'm gonna just redo this bit. It turns out that every time a truck arrives late to the Costco's and the Walmarts, they actually would charge the shipper penalty. And we didn't know this. If we didn't talk to those people, we wouldn't know this. We would have always kind of kept the impression that, yeah, the big problem is kind of how do I give them more visibility into where stuff is? Did it arrive on time? And all of these things were important. But as we started to talk to those shippers, it turns out the penalties are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars magnitude. This is a painful problem. So we talked to a particular customer who had $500,000 problem. Now, you promise me KPIs, great. It's very hard and it's not tangible. Okay, great. Well, you're going to give me visibility on the KPIs. What's the price tag that I can assign to that? It's a nice to have. It's like, oh, great, I can get these metrics, but I already get these metrics today, right? So when we talk to these shippers, they're like, oh, today I ask my carrier, or if I'm dealing with a broker, my broker aggregates all of these numbers to me. He does the hard work, and then he shares an Excel sheet with me at the end of the day. And that tells me how I'm doing or how they're doing against the KPI. So it's a problem that for me as a shipper, I've outsourced to someone else. And they're solving it to me. And guess what? They're solving it to me for free. So if I come to it from this standpoint, that customer has a free thing today that he's getting, and now I'm asking him to pay for it. There is no win-win. It's a lose-win proposition. Now, when you go to that same customer and say, I'm going to save you $500,000 a year. Now I can justify $100,000 a year.
5x return.
Damn, that's sweet, right? And this is the kind of insight that you'll never ever come up with if you're sitting in the room with your own team hypothesizing as a startup about what your customers want. It's that rubber hits the road. It's those conversations that will yield you the biggest benefit and will give you the most traction. And these are the conversations that you want to do in the earliest you can. Like I think, it's like front loading the work. The more you front load that discovery work, the smoother the rest of your startup journey becomes, because you've actually done that hard work of learning who the customers are and what the big pain points are. Compare this to a world where I've built a solution around the visibility, right? And oh, great, we're aggregating all of these metrics and it's beautiful, but then it doesn't solve the problem. Now, if I built the product at that point based on the visibility, I would build a product that just tracks, KPIs and how are we measuring each one of them. But now that I know the problem is actually a revenue problem, right, or a penalty problem, now my dashboard looks completely different. My dashboard is now reporting about how many penalties I mitigated, right, or how much penalties I've incurred in a day. And this is the kind of reporting that no one was able to give that shipper. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense.
Here's some questions that people might be like, oh, why do I have these questions? So let me show you some of these. Background, we talked about. I'll point out to these, okay? How big is your team? We're teasing out, are they a 5 to 10 people team, or are they like a 50 to 100 people team or more? The other one here, you'll see that we're asking about what their favorite books are. Who are the influencers they're into? And what if you think about or what podcasts these people watch, or what YouTube channels that customer watches. And if now you kind of flip to think about it from a marketing standpoint, what this translates to is influencers I can reach out to and try to kind of cross promote with them. Or, I know now if I want to launch ads, I know where to launch them on. Is it on YouTube, right? So if I've done 100 interviews and I know that 90 out of these 100 customers listen to one YouTube channel, I know where to go to immediately become an authority, right? Or to immediately grab their attention. All I have to do is show up on that podcast, or sponsor that podcast, or sponsor that channel, or just throw ads based on those influencers. So these are things that will make your go-to market much, much easier. And this is the part where we're like, walk me through a typical day for you. This is a really important one, because if I can put myself in your shoes and I know what your day-to-day looks like, I can actually see where my product fits in your day-to-day. Because if your product doesn't fit, right, nothing that I'll ever do that'll work. Example, to take the same logistics problem we talked about earlier, you could be thinking, oh man, a mobile app would be really cool for this problem. But if I met this customer and I know that 90% of his day is spent sitting behind the desk, this changes how I'm building the product. A mobile app will not do. They're sitting on a desktop 90% of the time. I want a desktop product now, right? Versus the trucker in the field, they're driving 90% of the time. They're never on a computer, so now I need an app for them. And that's how this is how this discovery translates into product features, translates into technology, translates into architecture, translates into metrics, translates to what APIs I want to integrate from that organization to be able to pull all of this data. And these are things that you'll never find out without this contact. And maybe we stop sharing the
And
doc at this point.
it's important to note that this is like a discovery background research process, and not even specifically the discovery of a sales call, because the things that would qualify for in a discovery sales call, yes, would still focus on pain. Pain is a must have
Yes.
in order to be able to sell. But with a discovery sales call, we're also going to be qualifying BANT, budget authority need timeline, MEDIC, metrics, economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, um, implicate pain, champion competition. Um, and then there's one more acronym that's escaping my mind. Um, all these would be very, very important towards qualifying the deal, but that's not what we're doing here. We're just doing the background research in order to have those 100 conversations to see how to pivot our product such that it's solving for pain. And that's the most important part.
And I would say you have the sales discovery where you have a product to sell. You're doing these discoveries before you have anything to sell. This is a discovery before you have a product, before you have an offer, before you actually firm up the idea. You're going and having 100 conversations based on the hypotheses that you set, right? And as you're having these conversations, you're going back to your team and sharing the learning and sharing how your hypothesis might have been, proved correct. Or what we're looking for is really ways to disprove my hypothesis, because that's essentially what I'm trying to do quickly. Is like, I have a theory and I need to go out quickly and either invalidate it to say, no, this theory is wrong and here's a better theory, or no, 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 I'm gonna right on the money, I'm gonna keep going the path I'm going. And you do this very, very quickly. In 2 to 3 weeks you'll be ahead of 90% of the startups, just because nobody does this. It's hard, it's intimidating, it's time consuming, it's awkward if you've never done it before, but luckily at BitLab we actually have formulas how you can do this in a way where you can add in social proof, add in an incentive for the person to actually take that call with you, right? Like I'm busy as an executive. If I can put myself in the B2B space, I'm busy as an executive. I have a million things screaming at me now. Why would I take the time to have a conversation with someone who has nothing to sell me potentially, right? I don't know. Like you, so I'm a founder reaching out to a customer to say, give me some of your time. And if I do this with no value in return, why as an executive would I take the call? Right? Let's say, Anatoly, you reach out to me and say, hey, I want to learn about you and what you do. And that's, by the way, something that founders get wrong is how do I actually pitch this in a way for my customer to say yes to? And we have a few methods that we can use. One is the easier, but I would avoid it, is incentivize them with a prepaid credit card, with a Starbucks gift card. So I find like a monetary incentive to say, hey, listen, I'm doing this in exchange for this, in exchange for your time, I'll offer $100 gift card. That's one way to do it. Not the preferred way because it will work out expensive, right? If you're doing 100 calls times 100, that's 10 grand in gift cards. I wouldn't do
But
that.
it's quick and easy if you have the budget for it.
Yes, and maybe I incentivize 2 or 3 conversations with gift cards, but then I'm using social proof for the rest, right? So if I got Anatoly to jump on a call with me and I can, in exchange, give him $100 gift card, the next time I'm talking to Shukri, who knows Anatoly, it's enough for me to say, oh, by the way, we met, your colleague Anatoly, or your competitor Anatoly. We met him and he shared all of these insights with us. And now I'm like, I want to be on that call, right? And so the more of these you do, now you have social proof working for you, and now you're able to do more conversations. That's one way to do it. The second, what we call the research method, where,
This guy's giving away all the gold.
man,
Man,
man, we shouldn't be
he's not
sharing
holding
this.
anything back.
We shouldn't be sharing this, but I'll share it anyways. What you do is essentially come in and say, hey, we're doing research. I'm doing research about your insert industry, insert problem, and in exchange for your time, I will share the findings with you. And I'm interviewing, 200 companies that are in your space. And then again, with the research method, so you do it with the first person, and hopefully, if that problem is painful, they'll want that research. So now you automatically can actually test the messaging and you can test your offer indirectly through, if that's problem that you're talking to me about is not painful enough, I might be like, no, thank you, I'm not interested, or no, maybe this is not a problem for me. And now you can also start to see segmentation in that market. So you might kind of have 10 conversations, out of which 9, there's no problem.
Especially if you personalize that research to their specific industry, saying, hey, I'm speaking to dirty founders similar to you um, about these issues that are very glaring. I'm compiling that report at the end, and I'll share it with you if you're willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, and so to give a concrete example, I think it helps because this whole discovery thing can be a lot like abstract. Let's make it tangible with more examples. If I'm if I want to do, let's say I'm building HR software for remote organizations. So what I would do is basically send a DM on LinkedIn to anyone who has like remote organization, and I'll be like, hey, I'm doing research on remote organizations and employee productivity. Are you concerned that your employees are not productive, right? I might send a little bit of a kind of teaser about certain things, and now I'm testing the messaging. I'm testing uh, how I can go to market, right? And so if I go on LinkedIn, message 10 to 100 companies that are remote based, I've learned a lot in a week, right? Imagine that I'm doing 5 to 10 discoveries a day. 5 discoveries a day, that's like 35 discoveries a week. Do this for 4 weeks. That's more than 100 discoveries, and you're done.
That's the best possible thing you can do
Yes.
to have those conversations, and the earlier the better.
And and what I'll once you've done this, what you'll see that actually the first conversation you have, it's awkward. You don't know a lot about them. The second, the third, the fifth, by the time you're 10 calls in, you're able to articulate the problem much better than they do. And once you're there, they're like, "Oh man, you're truly an industry expert. What do you have to teach me?" You'll make them genuinely curious about you and what you have to offer. And now you also start to tease out certain words, language. I think this is another thing we want to go into is language. Every niche or every market or every customer have special language, terms, and it helps to talk here about what we call problem language and solution language. Besides listening to the content of that discovery call, what I'm looking for is language, is terms, right? If I come from software industry, I might know what agile is. If you're coming as an outsider, you don't know what agile means, right? If I come from if I go to logistics industry, I'll hear a term OTIF. You're gonna be like, Shukri, what the hell is OTIF? And I'm like, oh, it's on time in full. And if you're on a call with a customer that says OTIF, and you're an outsider to that industry, you will not know what that means. And so now, how can you sell to someone when you might, in my language, as the solution? So if I'm an outsider to the logistics industry, I can be saying, hey, you're gonna get your stuff on time. Great. But in the industry, there's a lingo for this that's called OTIF. So if I say you're gonna get your stuff on time versus, oh, we promise you're gonna hit your OTIF, that message will stand out to me much more because you're using my lingo. So now I'm like, I'm resonating with it, I'm associating with that. I'm like, yeah, you're an insider. Versus if you use terms that I've never heard before, you're an outsider, you know nothing, I don't want to talk to you, right? So there's no resonance. And so part of that discovery will also pulling from the customer literal sentences that are the problem language. And once I pull them, what do I do with them? Those sentences go to ads. Those sentences go to copy. Those sentences go into my product itself, right? Like because I'm now describing things the way that prospect describes them.
And when you first join a company, or you're first penetrating into any industry or doing discovery, something that's absolutely vital is building up a glossary of terms.
Yes.
I remember when I joined my first sales company, that's one of the first things that I started doing was just a glossary of um, CSR, corporate social responsibility, and environmental social governance terms because I was within that industry, and there was like I think a list of 30 words that I came up with, and as a salesperson, it's absolutely vital to be able to speak their language. I remember almost losing a deal because I went with the wording of grants management as opposed to sponsorships, which, depending on which company and which industry you speak with, they're completely different things. And so sometimes you have to come up with all-encompassing terms like charitable givings, which can encompass a lot of things and is friendly towards all industries and not just specific ones. And so making sure that you're on the same plane when communicating and leveling with them is absolutely vital.
And using what we call their niche language, right? Because now you're resonating with me at a much deeper level because I'm like, oh yeah, you understand this, you come from this industry. And every industry we work in, there are terms like that, right? We talked about OTIF and logistics. If you're talking about, in the medical world, you're talking about prescriptions, you're talking about MRIs and X-rays, and so there's like now very specific terms there too. If I switch gears and say I'm in the crypto industry now, Web3, right, there's a ton of jargon there too. If I switch to, if I think about casting and acting industry, there are terms that are specific there. And by the way, sometimes the same term carries different meaning depending on the industry. I'm just gonna try to think of examples of this in other industries. So we talked logistics, we talked healthcare. If I'm in financial, right? If I'm in fintech, there's something called the mid. So if I tell you, Anatoly, how many mids do you have? You're gonna be like, what do you even mean? What does a mid even mean, right? So every industry has terms that an outsider might not understand or might even get wrong, and an insider kind of, if you watch two people in the same industry talking, it's like they're talking a foreign language. And so what you're trying to pick up on is that foreign language and integrate it into how you talk to your customers as a CEO, which is going back to the point why the CEO must do this discovery themselves, because they're also picking up that language, and they're picking up on the actual pain. And now I also will have empathy. I think if I've sat down with 100 people and I made them describe to me their pain and the implications of it, now I have much more empathy for that customer and that pain point. And maybe I discover that I don't have empathy, and then I have no business being in that business. If I don't care
And
about,
that you're cold-hearted.
and it's okay to be, it's okay to be cold-hearted, but if that pain doesn't light you up as a CEO, right? And I have another CEO in the same industry competing with you, and he has a little bit more empathy. Who's gonna win, you think? They're gonna win. Because everything that they're gonna do is really focus around that customer, around the pain point, and I can feel it. And that gives me energy, that fuels my journey, that fuels my mission, and I have a much stronger motive to act, to last.
What you're selling absolutely must resonate with you. Um, Going back to our conversation around pain, how do you distinguish a nice to solve problem and a true market pain that customers are actually willing to pay for?
One, the sense of urgency behind the conversation. The biggest is the sense of urgency. If I say I want to talk to you about this problem and you take 3 months to get back to me, clearly, absolutely no pain. If I come to you and want to talk to you about something that is top of mind for you, how fast can you move for that? How fast will you move? You'll probably, respond to me in the next 5 minutes and say, hey, yeah, I want to talk to you about this problem. And now I'm scheduling you, and maybe my schedule is busy, and I'm scheduling you 3 months from now, but the time to action is actually much shorter. And that's what you're looking for, because that time to action translates to faster go to market, easier sales process, faster process to have conversations. The higher the pain, the faster the sales cycle. The higher the pain, the higher the perceived value of your offer. And so we're looking for maximum pain. Ideally, I want maximum pain for the richest customer that I can find. That's the magic formula.
And I think a part of it becomes, depending on which organization that you're in, as a salesperson, you only have so much you can do when it comes to addressing a pain. Because let's say I'm selling a software, right? The software solves for particular pains. And there are things that I can do within my verbiage, within my wording, to properly communicate that pain to the customer over the phone, over a sales call, over a demo. And I can get pretty deep with it by not even explaining to them, but having them explain their pain. Um, but ultimately, an average salesperson has very little control over the product market fit because it's already done. The software, when a salesperson enters into the picture, typically the software is already created to address specific pains.
Yes.
And it becomes very painful to sell a product that doesn't address burning pains
Yes.
because everything becomes a lot more difficult. There is no urgency, especially if the market's very competitive and they're using a solution that's decent, but the ROI of switching is not there. Yeah, sure, like your product is a bit better than the other product, but the pain of switching is so much higher than whatever you're solving for. The ROI needs to be 10x
Yes.
for them to switch.
And I think you're touching two excellent points that I think maybe we want to dive deeper into. Uh, One is the hidden cost, and two, what we want to delve into is early adopters. Another thing you want to be mindful of when you're going and having these discovery conversations, especially in the early days of your startup where you don't have a product, you have nothing to show, you haven't built a thing. The ideal customers I want to talk to are those who have, we said it, those who have the highest level of pain. And I think we want to also call problem awareness, right? So in any market, you know what? Let me bring something. Let me bring a chart. I think it'll be helpful to bring a chart. Uh,
A state of product awareness.
no, diffusion of innovation. The chart I want to bring on is the diffusion of innovation model. And I think it's helpful to kind of look at the market. Actually here, this one. Let me just open this.
Mm.
If I take a group of people, if I take any market, usually you have innovators in that market, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. My favorite example for late majority and laggards is government, right? Government is extremely rigid, right? If I try to sell anything to the government, they're extremely rigid, they're extremely slow, there's a ridiculous amount of red tape, right? That means my sales cycle is as long as they come. And this also means
No rush at all.
yeah, and if I try to go to market, my go to market is going to be a heck of a time. It's going to be hard. Uh, Now, if I take startups in general, like if I have a solution that I can sell to government and I can sell to startups, would I pick government or startups? Let's look at the trade-offs, right? Government has way more money, potentially, yes, but then I have to go through a ridiculous amount of red tape, compliance, right? Banks is another industry which is also like, in general, tends to be kind of laggards or extremely conservative in the decisions that they make, right? Like they're risk averse. A lot of banks are risk averse. So now if I want to go to market again and I can target startups and I can target the established banks, you'll see that the amount of effort, how long the sales cycle is, the complexity and the maturity of the product itself needs to be in a certain state. For example, if I'm going to put a product into a bank, I know that security is going to become a big thing, compliance is going to become a big thing. So there's a lot of things to be done besides building the actual product, right? When we built products for the medical industry, we go through what we call penetration testing. So a pen test might cost a startup something like 15 grand to 20 grand to 25 grand just to do that penetration testing. And so if I'm just starting out and if I want to go target banks, now I have to do that. So now I have to spend 20 grand just to say, oh yeah, I've done an audit, right? And this audit I might have to do every year. Versus if I go to startups, they might not have as stringent of a security requirement. I might not be required to do the penetration test. And in fact, they might be okay with the product that is not super secure because they don't have a lot to protect, right? So now, who do I want to go after? I think I would start with the startups. And then eventually, in 2 years, when I've sold a lot, captured a good chunk of the market, I have revenue coming in. Now it might make sense for me to go after the early majority, or the late majority, and the laggards. Right? If I have a very limited runway as a startup, if I only have $500,000 in the bank to run, trying to go after, if I have $500,000 in funding, and now I try to go after banks, I have this much money to go after a space with this much requirements for my company, right? So I have to do the compliance and I have to do the security. That I can put $100,000 or $200,000 price tag. That's half my runway, just to go after a bank or a government, right? Terrible idea. Versus if I go after startups, I don't have to build as much. I don't have to burn as much of my runway, and I'm closing faster. I'm selling faster. I'm validating faster. Everything happens faster in these organizations. Those are perfect, what we call early adopters. And this is something a startup has to be mindful of. Trying to take your immature, cobbled together, early day solution and take it to a late majority, of course you're going to face resistance. Nobody wants to buy that, right? Why? It's just, look at it. It's the same product. I just took it to a more mature market or a more conservative or the late majority, and now they're looking for something completely different. My product is not going to work. There's no product market fit. So to do product market fit, my job is to identify who are the early adopters, who are the people that I can go to market super duper fast with, close them, build the name, build the brand, build the reputation, build the money, and now I can go after the early majority and the late majority and the laggards. And in fact, I want to show you one more thing. Let me just see if I have. No, it's okay. So you'll also notice that some people are more. Okay, sorry. No, I need to find there's a better graph than this one. Let me see if I have it. No, okay. You know what? Let's just find a nicer one.
And I think a part of it is also just the size of the organization that you're going after, because uh, one of the biggest advantages that smaller organizations have is the fact how quickly they can pivot and redirect. A 10-person startup can make decisions like this
Yes.
if they have a competent founder
Yes.
um, and executive team. Whereas large 1,000-person organizations, at the biggest example of that would be the government. Like it'll take them years to make a decision because they're not incentivized, and two, they really have to do their risk analysis.
Yeah, and this is not, and to your point, we're not attacking banks and government. There is a reason for that structure to be stable, right? I think, I don't know if people would trust the government that kind of moves extremely fast and makes a lot of mistakes.
Of
So,
course.
so then there is, like the world forces certain organizations to be in a certain way, right? I don't want a bank who gets hacked every day. That's why banks are risk averse, because their main job is not to lose people's money. And if they're losing people's money all the time because they're getting hacked all the time, that's obviously bad, right? So now we go into, you want to find that right business structure to do business with as a founder. And so the other thing, which when we talk about early adopters, is are they aware they have a problem? The worst person to sell to is someone who who's conservative, right? Like for example, a bank, and they're not even aware they have a problem. Because now my job becomes twice as hard, because first I have to convince you have a problem, convince you it's a painful problem, and then convince you that I have the right solution for that problem. And that's too much convincing to do. What this translates to, again, is a lot of energy expended in me educating the market about the product. Right? And now going back to draw the sophistication of the market, which Eugene Schwartz, I think I read this first with Eugene Schwartz writing, which was like maybe we should geek out on Eugene Schwartz, right? So Eugene Schwartz is one of these, OG advertisers. And his book, like Breakthrough Advertising, is one of the best books I've ever read on advertising. You can't find it on Amazon. You have to buy it from, there's like a specific website you buy from. It's an expensive book, totally worth it.
I think it's like $200, $300,
Yeah.
something like that right now. Um, or you just find a Kindle version.
And let's talk about this, because I think also it's a relevant topic when we talk about the discovery, right? Uh, every market, so Eugene Schwartz says that every market has a different level of sophistication, right? If it's a market that's been established for the last 100, 200, 300 years, everyone who's in this market has heard every claim, right? If you're in, let's take HR software. If you're in HR software existed for the last 20 years. So as a company who has a team and have HR needs, I know Oracle exists, and I know PeopleSoft exists, and I know, name your favorite HR companies. I've heard of them all. I know them all. So if someone needs to come in and gives and has a new claim about, oh, I'm going to be able to do this, in 10% of the time, I'm going to be calling bullshit. Because I'm like, dude, I know this market. I know all the tools that are out there. I know the capabilities that are out there. And so the more mature the market, the more skepticism you're going to face when you try to kind of go to market with something. Because they've seen it all, they know it all. It's hard for you to differentiate, right? The more mature the market, the harder for you to differentiate, and the more insane claims you have to make, right? So that's going back to the 10x better. Why does your product have to be 10x better? Because if I'm going to a mature market and there are already so many alternatives, I have to be much better than all of them to justify the hidden costs. And this is where now we kind of go into the hidden cost conversation, because we like to think, oh yeah, I have a solution better than the alternative, and potentially it is, right? Yeah, maybe I built a software, maybe there's a process that's done on paper now, and now I'm gonna transfer it into software. And in theory, you're like, dudes, you're using paper now, it's horrible, you should move to a software. But you see resistance, right? Why? Because a lot of times there is hidden costs that you are not aware of. It's not that simple for people to go from paper to a system, because now they have business processes that have to change when you change from paper to a system, right? This also might mean I need to go and scan and digitize every piece of paper I have in my business. So now there's a process involved in the migration from paper-based to digital-based, right? And all of these are costs. Their time, their team hours from my team to do these things. And now I have to train everyone on the new system that I'm implementing, because everybody has done it on paper for the last 10 years, and I've trained everybody to do it on paper, and now I have to train a whole bunch of people on how to use a new system. And all of these are switching costs, right? It's not free. It's never free to switch from one alternative to the other. There's a time commitment, there's a learning curve, there's migrations, all of these switching costs. To overcome them, I have to make my product so much better, right? And a rule of thumb is like 10x better, where it becomes no-brainer to switch because your product is so much better that I'm willing to absorb all of these kind of hidden or switching costs to move to your product. Now, that's kind of on the sophisticated market. Versus we take a nascent market like AI tools, right? We talk, let's say, for example, SEO AI tools. This is a new market. This is like a, 1-year-old market. There aren't as many competitors. I've used nothing today, or my alternative today is 10x worse, because my alternative today to an SEO copywriting tool is to go hire a consulting copywriter who's going to charge me $2,000 to do a page, right? Versus use an SEO generation AI tool, and it's going to do the same job in 5 minutes. 2 days to 2 to 5 days, $2,000 is the process today. $100 subscription, 5 minutes. Totally gonna switch, right? And so now we go into the less the market is sophisticated. If it's a nascent market, you don't have to make big claims. All you have to say is, dude, we exist. And people will flock to you because there's no alternatives, right? So the lack of alternatives translates into easier time, especially if you kind of built around the painful problem. And we're saying there is no alternative to this painful problem. There is no solution to this painful problem, or no solution could exist before now for that painful problem. Boom, right? And now we go why this is important, because as an investor, I wanna talk about your product and ask why you and why now. And I think why now is, if the technology wasn't there before and now it is, and this technology now enables me to do new things, now is the perfect time to use this technology, right? To take it and build it, and build something and go to market with it. So we kind of talked a little bit about the hidden costs. We talked a little bit about early adopters and how you want to go after early adopters, and not try to go after late adopters, right? And so some of the characteristics that we're looking for when we have these discovery conversations are people who are open, or industries that are open, people who are tolerant of risk, who are willing to take risk, who have a painful problem. They know they have a painful problem, right? We're also looking for people who have the means to pay. I don't want to go after customers who just, small businesses. Let's take the example of small businesses, and I love small businesses, but the reality of running a small business is just, you're surviving day to day. You don't have as much money to throw at any problem. And so, right, this is where I want an early adopter, and I want an early adopter who has the problem, but also has the means to pay to get that problem solved. And this is another one that founders get wrong all the time, going after a segment, going after a market, and the market has a problem, an extremely painful problem. It's just they can't pay.
I say we cut it here.
Okay, let's do that. And I think we covered a lot of cool stuff today.
100%.
Yeah.